Among everything else going on planet Earth today, it is sentencing day for Michael Cohen. This is the president's longtime attorney, his longtime fixer. He will be the first member of the president's inner circle who gets a prison term, perhaps a lengthy prison term. In a new interview with Reuters, President Trump says he's not concerned about this, and specifically he says he's not concerned about being impeached, and he dismisses all the contacts between Russians and 16 of his close associates before and during the 2016 campaign. He calls it peanut stuff. Joining us now is Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason, who conducted that interview, along with Steve Holland, with the president yesterday. Also with us, CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeff Mason, I want to start with you because there's a lot that came out of this interview between you and the president. We have that peanut stuff comment, and we have the issue of impeachment. Now, the I word has been swirling around the White House for some time, and people who talk to the president rightfully do question him. But there is this notion that it's bugging him. Did it seem to you that this was bothering him? Is this a specter that he sees out there as a real threat?
Well, his answer to that, at least verbally, was no. He said that it would be difficult to impeach someone who has done nothing wrong, and he listed the accomplishments that he's very proud of since being in office, from the Supreme Court to getting other judicial nominees on the court, to deregulation, to the economy. And I pressed him again, and I said, so is this on your radar? And he says, no, I'm not concerned. So that's what he's saying. I mean, the reality is there is reason for concern, because Democrats, as you know, will be taking over the House of Representatives in January, and that's a very real possibility that impeachment is something that they will pursue.
Here's another thing that was brought up in that interview, Jeffrey, and I want to ask you and your legal mind about this. The president was asked about the campaign finance violations, for which part of the reason that Michael Cohen is probably going to prison today. And at first, you know, he said he knew nothing about it. As you'll recall, months ago, the president said that. Well, yesterday, here is how he explained the payments, the hush money payments to the women, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Number one, it wasn't a campaign contribution. If it were, it's only civil. And even if it's only civil, there was no violation based on what we did. Okay? Well, tell that to Michael Cohen, who may be facing some prison time. How do you interpret the president's interpretation of it not being a crime?
Well, it is, you know, it is a defense as if he's ever charged with this sort of with involvement in this criminal conduct. His problem is, the president's problem is that Michael Cohen has acknowledged it was a campaign contribution, and he has acknowledged it was illegal, and he knew it. And the broader question is, for whose benefit did this crime take place? It wasn't for Michael Cohen's benefit. Why would Michael Cohen do this except he had been told to do it by the person who was the real beneficiary of it? And remember the timing of these two payments. They were right on the eve of this election, so they could have been, you know, they were to prevent extremely damaging disclosures on the eve of the 2016 election.
But is it only a civil crime? Is it not a criminal crime?
Well, I mean, that's up to prosecutors. I mean, it is true that many violations of campaign finance law are treated civilly, but some of them are treated criminally. Prosecutors in the Southern District of New York decided this one should be treated criminally. But it's not up to the person who commits the violation to decide whether it's civil or criminal. It's up to prosecutors.
So, Jeffrey, in your interview, and again, I read the transcript, to try to figure out how legally sound the president's answers were, and you tried to press him a little bit on the idea of whether or not he directed and coordinated with Michael Cohen, and also the issue of whether or not he knew that these expenditures would be campaign finance violations, and he seemed to try to not answer those questions.
Yeah, that's true. And the context of the discussion about Michael Cohen was a question that I asked him about, you know, had you discussed with Michael Cohen campaign finance laws? And you're right, he sort of used that question to bring attention to Hillary Clinton, his 2016 opponent, instead. And he also said that Michael Cohen was a lawyer, that Michael Cohen was someone he relied on, and Michael Cohen should have known what he was doing. And then he followed that up later by saying that his lawyers now say Michael Cohen didn't do anything wrong, or that they didn't do anything wrong with that. So it was a sort of multifaceted response.
Yeah.
He said Cohen should have known what he was doing. It wasn't a criminal problem, and if it was a problem at all, it would be civil, but it wasn't a problem. And, hey, everybody look at Hillary Clinton. What she did was far worse.
I submit.
And by the way,
Go ahead,
I mean, if this ever were to come to some sort of legal proceeding, the president could make that argument, and that is not a bad argument, that, hey, I was dealing with a lawyer, I assumed he knew what the law was, and I just followed his legal advice. Now, there are counter-arguments there that, you know, it just was too obvious that even though a lawyer was telling you that, but in fairness to the president, advice of counsel is sometimes a defense in white-collar cases.
And he
when I'm
used
reading
the
that
word
carefully,
reliance repeatedly, that I was relying on him. It's called relying on your attorney. So that was definitely in his vocabulary, or in response to this question.
That's
was
interesting
he wanted
to me.
to emphasize.
That's interesting to me. That indicates to me that he knew exactly what he was saying there, and he was trying to find a legal way out of this, because he didn't deny coordinating with and directing. It didn't seem to me he was denying, you know, coordinating with and directing, and he didn't answer directly the notion of whether or not he knew the law.
Well, and he used the word, and you showed this in the quote that you just referred to. He used the word "we," you know, what we did. So that, you know, that was an acknowledgement that it was he and Michael Cohen together.
Hey, Jeffrey, when Michael Cohen is sentenced today and gets somewhere between 3 and 5 years in prison, as is expected, is this a cautionary tale for any of the other players in and around the Russia investigation? Or is Michael Cohen's case so unique because of his tax evasion and his taxi business that it really isn't transferable, what's happening to him?
Oh, I think it is a cautionary tale. I mean, and look at Paul Manafort. I mean, Paul Manafort also had a variety of shady business deals that got him convicted, but it was his involvement with Donald Trump that turned it into a major criminal case. I mean, you know, one of the larger stories of the Trump presidency is how many people he's brought down around him. I mean, how many people involved with Donald Trump since he became a candidate have had their reputations enhanced, have had their business opportunities enhanced, you know, our lives are better off. I'm talking about the people around him. Not many. I mean, most of the people, whether it's a Rex Tillerson or a Jeff Sessions, or certainly all the people who've been criminally charged around Donald Trump, have been brought down. And as he thinks about bringing in a new White House chief of staff, you know, who wants to be part of that environment? I think in that respect, Michael Cohen and everyone involved with the Trump presidency represent a cautionary tale.
The president claims that 10 to 12 very qualified people want to go in, although we know it's not Nick Ayers, we know it's not Rick Santorum, who said last night on our air that he wouldn't take the job. Jeff, this week, there's something almost every day. I mean, there's the Michael Cohen sentencing. There was a Flynn sentencing memo last night. There was a Manafort hearing yesterday. There are more hearings as the week goes on. How closely do you get the sense the president is paying attention to these developments?
Oh, I think he's paying close attention to these developments. I mean, I think he's watching everything. I mean, I know we all know that he watches a lot of television, so it would be hard not to escape what's going on by turning on the TV. You know, in our interview, we talked about a whole lot of things, not only this, the Russia probe and Michael Cohen, but we also talked about China and trade. One of the bigger headlines, honestly, that he said and that he's dealing with is he suggested that he'd be willing to intervene with the Justice Department on behalf of that CFO from Huawei, the Chinese company who was detained in Canada. He said he'd be willing to intervene on that if it were part of a trade deal with China. So he's looking at that. He's prepared for the Democrats, or at least he's having to prepare for the Democrats taking control of the House and dealing with international trade negotiations, which have been hitting markets and hurting his potentially his chances of re-election in 2020.
And Jeff, did you talk about the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, any possible government shutdown and all of that drama?
We talked about it a little bit, yes. The interview was just a couple hours, I think, after that raucous meeting with the Democratic leadership. And, you know, he said, we asked him if my colleague Roberta Rampton, who was also in the interview with us, I think she asked the question about whether or not he would consider any particular deal or spending deal to prevent a government shutdown. And he said we'd have to look at it. So he said, he sort of indicated he's willing and able to work with Democrats going forward, but that there are two options. Either Democrats will go down, and this was his framing, Democrats will go down the track of doing legislation, and he believes they can get a lot of legislation done, or they'll go down the track of what he called presidential harassment. And that's referring to subpoenas and investigations, and he said there's no middle ground, it's going to be one or the other. That's the way he believes it will go.
Fascinating stuff. Jeff Mason, Jeffrey Toobin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next, a woman who has endured so much pain, the loss of her daughter who was killed after a murderer drove a car into a crowd of counter-protesters at that white nationalist rally, neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville. A jury recommended life in prison for the man that murdered her. A jury in Charlottesville, Virginia, recommended life in prison for the man who plowed his car into a crowd of counter-protesters at that white nationalist rally last year. He killed 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injured dozens more. A judge will decide his punishment next year. Joining us now is Heather Heyer's mom, Susan Bro. Susan, thank you so much for being with us. We know it's been a very long an emotional trial for you. So thank you for being here, and tell us what that moment was like when you heard the jury recommending life in prison.
Honestly, I was relieved. I think that for public safety that needed to happen, but I also felt that it was not only important that Heather and the survivors have their day of justice, but also that we send a very strong message that we will not tolerate hate.
And in fact, you made a personal decision that I read not to be consumed by hate during this ongoing ordeal. How did you manage to achieve that?
I knew that he was in the hands of justice. Had he been out roaming around, I can't promise how I would have felt, but I felt secure in handing him over to prosecution and to judgment that it was not my problem. I had plenty else to do with the Heather Heyer Foundation, and I just didn't feel like I needed to consume my own self with hate, because hate just consumes that one that hates. It doesn't do anything to the person that you hate. So in my life, I prefer not to hate people.
I think that that's a goal that a lot of people aim for, but it's not always that easy. Obviously, when you're watching...
No, it's not.
I mean, I don't have to tell you, watching your daughter's murderer in trial. What was the entire trial like?
It was emotionally exhausting. I felt like I was on stage all the time. A lot of people were focused on me and my reactions. It was particularly difficult the day that they played videos of the actual crime as it was committed, and the day that they talked about Heather's autopsy report. Those were extremely difficult days. I will tell you, I sat and cried a lot in court during those.
That must have been awful, just awful. And I know that you had an opportunity to make a victim's impact statement. And so what did you want to say to the court and to the killer?
I basically said Heather's death was an explosion in our lives. It robbed us of someone who was loving and caring and committed to family, committed to justice, committed to equality, robbed the world of a wonderful person. Someone, I'd finally gotten through the adolescent years, which were tough. I had gotten through her 20s, which were interesting to say the least, as she established herself in her own apartment and working and things. And we were finally at a point where I felt like we had an actual friendship beyond just mother-daughter friendship, and we enjoyed each other's company. A couple of times a month we would meet for dinner and have long talks. We would text each other once in a while. Someone falsely reported or accidentally reported once that she was my best friend. No, I allow my adult children to be adults. I don't try to be overly involved in their lives, but if they want to be friends, that's wonderful for me. And she and I had finally gotten to that place, and It was not the death in the family I would have expected. It was definitely a punch in the jaw.
I think that we can all appreciate how heartbreaking that is. And you've said that you don't want Heather to be silenced, that this murderer couldn't silence her. And so what is Heather's message?
Well, I say that Heather stood that day with her friends just simply as a support and an ally to say, Black lives do matter. There's no place for hate in our community. And I use our community in really referring to our world. And everybody needs to stand up and get busy. It's one thing to give lip service. It's another thing to see some actual work done. And honestly, I can't say that we have made a lot of really noticeable changes for marginalized communities in the last year and a half. I feel that a lot of people will think that this trial is the end of the story, and this was not the beginning of the story, nor is it the end of the story. The civil rights movement has gone on for decades, particularly here in Charlottesville, and it will continue. I just don't want people to think that we're done now.
Yeah.
First off, the trials are not done. They will go on for years, most likely. But
yeah, there are other
main thing is that the work.
I hear you, and there are other hate crimes that he will be facing. I just want to last ask you, because Heather's story has gotten so much attention, because the president inserted himself in that way and it became so controversial, where he said there are good people on both sides. Did you hear from the president during the course of this?
So I've told this story a number of times, but I'll tell it again because people may have forgotten. I turned my phone off on the way to the funeral because I was trying to concentrate, and I'd already had one politician call me. And so I just turned my phone off, and we did the funeral. We had the reception afterward. We went home. Some family came home with us. They stayed a while. Then we took Heather's dog to the vet. And by the time I turned my phone on, it was about 10:30 at night. And meanwhile, I was watching the news, and I saw that there had been 3 phone calls from the White House during the funeral itself. They each sounded a bit increasingly frantic, which I thought was odd. But yeah, once I heard what he had to say, I just said, I think he's busy and I'm busy, and neither one of us really has time to talk to one another. And the only thing I ever have particularly had to say to him is, please think before you speak.
And that's still your message? You still feel that way today?
Oh, yeah. Well, on the anniversary of her death, I believe he had a large crowd of bikers come to the White House. And I have nothing against bikers in general, except for the ones that proudly display their Nazi slogans and their Nazi tattoos, many of whom were there at the White House. And again, he was delighted with the crowd. So I took that as a dog whistle. He celebrates people that I choose not to align myself with. Well, not Susan, the bikers, but the Nazis.
Understood. Susan, we're very, very sorry for your loss. We know, as you say, this is not the end, not even for you. This is just the beginning. There are other cases coming up that he'll be facing, but we really appreciate you taking this moment and just letting us know what these past months have been like. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
John.
Great discussion. So can Democratic leaders and President Trump make a deal to keep the government open? We're going to ask a senator if there's any room for negotiation in this budget battle. President Trump is threatening to shut down the government over his demand for billions of dollars for his border wall. Listen to the president yesterday with Democratic leaders.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down.
Joining me now is Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Senator, thank you so much for being with us.
You bet, John.
You just heard the president, I should say he would be proud to shut down the government over border security. I guess my question to you and Democrats is, would you be equally proud to withhold your votes for funding for the president's border wall?
We have never withheld funding for border security, John, and we're not going to. There are two bipartisan paths on the table right now that the president can embrace. One is that we do the budget for the rest of the year with between $1 billion and $1.6 billion in border security funding. Just order of magnitude, last year we did a bipartisan deal with $1.3 billion, and the president was not even able to spend all that money while he was complaining about immigration. That deal is on the table. It's bipartisan. And the second deal that's on the table is if the president doesn't want that, we will do a continuing resolution, which means, as you know, let's just keep spending for the next 2 months, say, what we've spent for the last few months while we work out a final deal. Those are both bipartisan proposals. They're both on the table. The president should accept one or the other, but he seems for some reason to be fixated upon the shutdown idea.
But you're not going to accept 5, correct?
He couldn't spend $1.3 billion last year. He could not spend $1.3 billion as he was going around making up things about people and demonizing immigrants and saying we needed more. He wouldn't even spend the money that we gave him last year. So the number that is being agreed upon in a bipartisan way appears between $1 billion and $1.6 billion for the next year. He can have that, or he can have 2 months of funding while we work out a final deal.
So you saw, presumably, what happened in the Oval Office yesterday. Yes. Given what we all saw, what do you think divided government will look like for the next 2 years?
Well, look, I think what you saw was the president being fact-checked to his face by strong Democratic leaders, which Republican leaders haven't been willing to do. When he's making up lies about this or that, he had Nancy Pelosi look him in the eye and say, first, you said this was going to be a private meeting. Why don't we talk privately and settle this? But the president decided he was going to play a trick on them and make it public, so they fact-checked him to his face. So I think what government's going to look like going forward is the president's not going to have enablers in Congress who are just going to go along with whatever the tweet du jour is. They're going to have people who are going to demand that he act like an adult, because we're sure going to do our job as the Article I branch to try to govern whether or not he is acting responsibly or not.
So, Senator, you're a lawyer. I want to shift gears, if I can, to the charges Michael Cohen is pleading guilty to today. Among others, it was involved in an illegal campaign finance, payment, which he says and the government says was directed and coordinated with the President of the United States. If you were a prosecutor and President Trump was not president, would you bring charges against him for this?
Well, you know what? I haven't read all the details of the charges. I mean, I've read the news accounts of it. But certainly, John, you have a very troubling situation. You now have a guilty conviction of the president's campaign manager. You have a guilty plea by the president's national security advisor, Michael Flynn. And now you have a plea and a sentencing by the president's personal lawyer. This is not like minor league plumbers that broke into the Watergate Hotel in 1972. These are people in the inner circle of this administration, and that's clearly why the president is so panicked right now.
So you are in the Foreign Relations Committee in Saudi Arabia and Jamal Khashoggi. These are issues you care deeply about. I want to read you something that President Trump said in this interview with Reuters overnight. It got lost in some of the talk about impeachment. He was asked whether the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was complicit in murder, and he was asked whether standing by Saudi Arabia means standing by the Crown Prince. And this is what he said. He said, well, at this moment, it certainly does. He's the leader of Saudi Arabia. They've been a very good ally. Do you believe Saudi Arabia has been a very good ally, and do you believe standing by Saudi means standing by the Crown Prince?
Well, look, they get to pick who their leader is. We cannot stand by the Saudis' abhorrent behavior under this leader. We cannot. Jamal Khashoggi was a Virginia resident. His kids are U.S. citizens who live in Virginia. He was a journalist who was targeted and assassinated in a state-sponsored crime because he was a journalist. There's no way that the U.S. should stand by that kind of behavior, and that's why we're going to have a vote, John, as you know, within the next few days to end U.S. support support for the war in Yemen. We have a separate track going to sanction the leaders of Saudi Arabia who were complicit in this gruesome crime. And the president's unwillingness to call it out, I think, is a real betrayal of the role that America should be playing in the world as a champion for human rights, and especially for press freedom.
Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, thanks so much for being with us this morning. If we don't see you again, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holiday.
Absolutely. John, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Senator. We'll be right back.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, good morning and welcome to your new day. We do have breaking news. This major international story developing this morning. The British Prime Minister Theresa May, she could be out. She faces a vote of no confidence very shortly with really no clear picture of which way it will go. This would be a major shift of power for one of America's closest allies.
So this vote was triggered by her handling of how Britain will exit the European Union. The embattled prime minister is about to take questions from lawmakers in Parliament, and it is getting very feisty there. We've been watching it during the commercial break, so we will bring that to you as soon as she enters the room. But CNN's international diplomatic editor, Nick Robertson, is live at 10 Downing Street with all the breaking details. This is really rapidly unfolding, Nick.
It really is. In 6 hours' time now, there will be a secret ballot of Theresa May's Conservative MPs. She needs to get 158 of them to back her against this vote of no confidence. She does feel that she's going to get it. She has said this morning everything is at stake. If there is a leadership contest, it will put the Brexit deal in jeopardy. Britain could leave without a deal in place. That could really hurt the economy and have a knock-on effect in Europe. So a lot in play. But right now, this is the weekly Prime Minister's question time. The Prime Minister faces questions for about half an hour. Raucous is what it can be. Cutting it can be. We've seen Theresa May withstand barrages of almost abusive questions from some MPs for hours at a time in the House of Parliament there that we're watching now. And this is what we can expect for Theresa May coming up. She will undoubtedly give a defence of her position. The first person to speak after that will be the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn. After that, you very likely will get a question from the Scottish National Party, the leader there. They have 35 MPs in Parliament. But really today is all about that secret ballot in about 6 hours' time. We have a lot of senior MPs tweeting their support for Theresa May. But of course, what they say in tweets may not reflect how they vote in that secret ballot.
Nick, we're watching this very closely, and what you see on the screen here is the House of Commons, some 650 seats there. This is sort of the normal level of mayhem. If this is 10, it could go to 12 or 15 very shortly as soon as Theresa May starts taking questions. You note it's a secret ballot inside the Conservative Party, which will determine her fate. She could still win, correct? But the margin be so close that she'd be damaged, perhaps fatally, correct?
Yes, that's at stake. If she doesn't get a large margin, then that could leave her weakened. However, this is double jeopardy. If she wins the vote,
Nick,
she
sorry to
cannot
interrupt
be
you.
challenged in leadership contest.
Nick, so sorry to interrupt. Theresa May has just taken the podium and she's about to take questions. Let's listen.
The whole House will be with all those caught up in the horrific incident in Strasbourg last night, and we stand ready to give whatever support the French authorities may need. Mr. Speaker, today I will have meetings, possibly many meetings, with ministerial colleagues and others.
Terry McCarthy!
So, just a normal day in the office then, Prime Minister. I would also want to share the condolences for the tragic events in the beautiful city of Strasbourg. Last year, the Prime Minister told us that there wasn't going to be a general election, and then there was. This week, she told us she wasn't going to pull the meaningful vote, and then she did. Can I ask her now if she's going to rule out having a general election and a people's vote?
Yes, can I say to the Honourable Lady, first of all, that I think that a general election at this point in time would not be in the national interest in the middle of our negotiations. And secondly, as she will have heard me say before in this House, I think we should respect the result of the referendum that took place in 2016.
Nigel Mills!
Given what we could call uncertainty about the future of the withdrawal agreement, could the Prime Minister give people some certainty, and that's EU nationals in the UK, that whatever happens to that deal, they will be allowed to stay on roughly the same terms as are in that draft agreement?
Well, honourable friend raises an important point, because I know that EU nationals living here in the United Kingdom will be concerned about what might happen in the circumstances if a deal is not agreed. We've been very clear as a government. Obviously, the withdrawal agreement that we've agreed does respect the rights and protect and guarantee the rights of EU citizens living here. But in the unlikely event of no deal, I've been clear that this government will still protect EU citizens' rights, and we would wish to know that actually other EU governments would respect the rights of UK citizens living in the EU as well.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will join me in joining the Prime Minister in condemning the shootings in Strasbourg and extending our sympathy to the families of those that have been killed or injured there. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to see the Prime Minister back in her place after her little journeys. Having told the media this morning that she's made progress, can she now update the House on what changes she has secured to her deal?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, I did travel to Europe yesterday and meet a number of heads of government in the Commission and the European Union Council. That's precisely because I had listened to concerns that were raised in this House and have taken those concerns to Europe. And no one that I met yesterday is in any doubt about the strength of concern there is in this House on the issue of the duration of the backstop. But I'm interested that the right honourable gentleman wants to know what progress we have made, because actually the right honourable gentleman couldn't care less what I bring back from Brussels. He's been clear. Whatever comes back from Brussels, he's going to vote against it, because all he wants to do is to create chaos in our economy. Division in our society, and damage to our economy. That's Labour, that's Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn!
It's very clear, Mr. Speaker, nothing has changed. If she needed any clarification, Mr. Speaker, if she needed any clarification about the temporary nature of the backstop, she needn't have gone to Europe. She could have just asked her Attorney General, who said it endures indefinitely. As the Prime Minister may recall, when she left on her journey, we were about to start day 4 of a 5-day debate on the deal. Since the Prime Minister has not achieved any changes, either to the withdrawal agreement or the future partnership, can she now confirm that we will have the concluding days of debate and votes within the next 7 days before the House rises for the Christmas recess?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, I had discussions with a number of people yesterday, and I have made some progress, but there is further. But of course there is an EU Council meeting. There are further discussions to be held. He asks about the meaningful vote. The meaningful vote has been deferred, and the date of that vote will be announced in the normal way. The business motion will be agreed and discussed in the usual way. But, well, everybody says, well, I'll tell members on the other side, when we've had a meaningful vote, we had it in the referendum on 2016. And if he wants a meaningful date, I'll give him one. 29th of March 2019, when we leave the European Union.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Totally and absolutely unacceptable to this House in any way. This House agreed a programme motion. This House agreed the 5 days of debate. This House agreed when the vote was going to take place. The government tried to unilaterally pull that and deny this House the chance of a vote on this crucial matter. The Prime Minister and her government have already been found to be in contempt of Parliament. Her behaviour today is just contemptuous of this Parliament and of this process. Mr. Speaker, The Prime Minister's appalling behaviour needs to be held to account by this House, as indeed the people of this country are more and more concerned about the ongoing chaos at the centre of her government. When she made her Lancaster House...
Order. Calm. On both sides of the House. Order! The questions will be heard however long it takes, and so will the answers. Don't try to shout down. All you do is wear out your voices, and you won't succeed. Amen. End of subject. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister made her Lancaster House speech, she set out her negotiating objectives, and they're worth looking at and quoting. The first objective is crucial. We'll provide certainty wherever we can. Does the current situation look or feel like certainty? Can the Prime Minister mark her own homework on this matter?
And indeed we have at every stage. At every stage. The Right Honourable Gentleman said we wouldn't get agreement in December. We did. He said we wouldn't get the implementation period in March. We did. He said we wouldn't get a withdrawal agreement and a political declaration. And we did. Concerns have been raised about the backstop, and as I said, we continue those discussions, and no one yesterday was left in any doubt about the strength of feeling in this House. But of course we all know what the Right Honourable Gentleman's answer to the backstop is: ignore the referendum and stay in the European Union.
If there's an agreement, why won't the Prime Minister put that agreement to a vote of this House? The Federation of Small Businesses says that planning ahead is impossible. Many, many other people around this country find planning ahead impossible because all they see is chaos at the heart of government and an inability to plan anything for the future. Yesterday, the cross-party select committee, including Conservative MPs for the Committee for Exiting the European Union, unanimously found the Prime Minister's deal, and I quote, fails to offer sufficient clarity or certainty about the future. Will the Prime Minister give the country at least some certainty and categorically rule out the option of no deal?
The way to ensure there is no deal is to agree a deal. That's the way you ensure there's no deal. But the right honourable gentleman talks about the impact on businesses. I'll tell him what will have an impact on businesses up and down this country. What we learned just a few days ago, that the Shadow Chancellor wants to change the law.
All right, you have been watching British Prime Minister Theresa May field questions. I think raucous is an understatement for what we've been listening to there. I mean, you hear the passion on both sides. It's a deadly serious issue, obviously, about how the UK is going to exit from Europe. But at times, it did have a Monty Python quality to it, with all of the sort of loud, raucous jeering from the gallery there.
This is full-throttle politics on display, and this is how they do it. They test their leaders. Their Prime Minister has to face questions in Parliament from both parties. You're seeing Jeremy Corbyn right there, who's head of the Labour Party, the chief opposition. He is debating her.
I see that. How many questions does he get?
I believe this can go on for hours. This can go on for hours and hours. The policy debate that we're watching here, though, has to do with Brexit. There was a referendum in the UK. They voted to leave the European Union. Theresa May has been charged with figuring out a way how to do that, and she hasn't been able to yet find a way that has the support of the Parliament. Let's bring in CNN Chief International Anchor Christiane Amanpour. Christiane, again, we love watching the theater here, but this is more than theater. This is the future of the United Kingdom, the future, to an extent, of the European Union, very much at stake today.
You know what? It absolutely is. But also, if you watch it, knowing that the pressure that Prime Minister Theresa May is under, you have to take your hat off to her. She's defiant. She's carrying on as usual. As yet, nobody has mentioned the leadership contest which she faces, and that will start to be enacted at 6 p.m. our time. That is 1 p.m. Eastern time. That secret ballot will start to take effect. This is essentially simply her being defiant, saying that she's going to fight that with all that it has, but more importantly saying that if you do not agree to this deal that I brought back, you who voted for Brexit have a serious risk of watching it simply disintegrate and not happen. And let's not forget that even though this unbelievable drama of this jousting, this verbal jousting across the box there between the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn has it in his power to call a vote of no confidence in the government and to bring it down and call a general election. He has not done that. He doesn't have any plan to do that, so you have to ask why. So you've really got this situation where you've got so much political drama. Many would say political dysfunction, and all the leaders kind of running away from what most dispassionate civil service people would say is the only way to have a Brexit deal that does not damage the UK economy, that does fulfill the referendum and takes the UK out of the EU, and that is, okay, more soft than the terrible, disastrous scenario alternative that would be a cliff edge, that would be jumping off the cliff at the end of March 2019 without a deal. Those are the options currently. Of course, those on further into the hinterland would like to add another option, and that is a second referendum. So all of these issues are on the table right now.
And I think that we just heard her say, no, that she did not support another referendum, another vote.
She doesn't.
Right. Go ahead.
No, she doesn't, but many, many people do. An increasing number of people on the street do, and a load of people in Parliament do. They don't have a majority right now, but there's a huge momentum, and people are on the streets, as you've seen, in the UK, in London, weekend after weekend recently, on both sides of this argument. And the truth of the matter is, and she keeps saying it, you who want a different outcome, and she's talking to her own party now as much as to the opposition, tell me your plan. Write down your plan. There is no plan. The hard-line Brexiters have no enumerated plan. Hers is a plan that's been bought off and signed off on by the 27 other leaders of the EU, and of course she's having a lot of difficulty over the so-called backstop, this insurance policy that they hope will keep an invisible border in the most crucial area, and that is between the Republic of Ireland, which belongs to the EU, and Northern Ireland, which is technically, well, it is still a part of the UK. So that is basically what she's saying. The hardline Brexiters, the fanatics in her own party, and I'm using language that other politicians are using, do not have a plan.
And that's what is happening today. You're seeing a revolt within her own party. If she survives that, there's still a question about whether or not her government can survive. That's what you're talking about with Jeremy Corbyn. But, Christian, the people that I talk to in the UK, as we're watching this, the part of it that's bleak is that no one sees a path. There isn't much of a clear path out of this that can get a majority support. There's no Brexit deal that can get a majority support. There's no deal that can get a majority support. Well, there's this stasis, this sort of, they're in quagmire right now.
Well, and the stasis, John and Alison, is possibly one of the most dangerous sort of moments, because stasis and no action by Parliament means the default on March 29th is no deal. It's what we call a cliff edge. There's simply no rules, regulation, rules of the road that would govern how the UK has any relationships with the EU. So anything from trade to supply lines to all sorts of issues, just getting medicine into the country, getting food into the country, all of that will be open to, interpretation and improvisation if indeed, not to mention the economy falling into recession, which is what economists are predicting in a worst-case scenario. So all of that. The fact of the matter is that you're right, there is no majority for that. But as I say, simply refusing to act by Parliament would lead to that. On the other hand, the deal that she has brought back from the European Union, apart from this issue of the backstop, which the hardline Brexiteers hate, the DUP, which is her backers in Northern Ireland, hate, and others say is unworkable, all the other issues are what which many in the civil service here tell me are the only way that Britain can leave the EU and still maintain not the quality of life we have now, not the level of economic activity we have now, but the least worst option for people's livelihoods, for people's lives, and for Britain as a player interacting still with Europe and the rest of the world, because the stakes are really, really high. And the truth of the matter is that this whole vote that happened in 2016 happened on a wing and a prayer and with a huge amount of policy ignorance in the air. It was just a load of boasts and wishful thinking and promises from the Brexiteers that were not written down, that did not have any evidence to back them up. And so this is the problem right now, that the people, in an emotional vote and in a feeling of pain over austerity and feeling that they weren't listened to, made that vote. But they didn't really know the nuts and bolts of what they were voting for.
Yes,
and so this
is
is the situation.
Christian, thank you very much for giving us all the context and telling us just how high stakes what we're watching play out there is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, John.
Yeah, this will go on. We think she usually takes questions for about 30 minutes, and then she usually departs. I don't know if today will be a special day and it will go on longer. We're watching it very closely. We're watching the financial markets. They are deeply concerned.
Does not seem like it's winding down.
No.
President Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen, will be sentenced just hours from now. Here in New York, he's facing years in prison. And prosecutors have spelled out that the president directed him to make hush money payments. We discuss all of that next.